All right, well, good evening. Let's open the meeting with, requests.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'd like to welcome our students back and our new student rep. Thank you. Hope you all had a great summer.
Yes.
Ready to get at it again. Excellent. Start off with a recognition of guests, requests to be heard. And public comment. We appreciate community members' willingness to share public comments with the board. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in its meetings. In order to permit fair and orderly expression of such comments, the board will provide a period at the beginning of the meeting during which visitors present to the board. Your time allowed is 3 minutes. The board respectfully requests that comments be relevant, appropriate, and not be personally directed. Do you have anyone signed up to provide in-person public comment this evening? And anybody online, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Let's see, next up, we are going to go into a public hearing. And 2024-25 annual budget. The 2024-25 budget and 4-year budget plan is on the agenda for adoption. Before the board takes action on the recommended budget, any person who wishes to be heard for or against any part of the budget may comment. If you wish to comment, please state and spell your names so we can have a record in our minutes. Public hearing on the proposal plan for the 2024 budget, 4-year budget plan is now open. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on or submit written comments on the proposed 2024-25 budget? Repeat it. The public hearing on the proposed plan for the 2024-25 budget and 4-year budget plan is now open. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on or submit written comments on the proposed 2024-25 budget? There's no response or comments. The hearing is declared closed. Consent agenda, staff status warrants minutes. Yes, approval of consent agenda items.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
I second.
Then the board approves the use of consent agenda, which includes the items listed. Is all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Administrative report, administrative reports, finance report. Director.
Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
How are you guys doing tonight?
Very well, thank you.
Perfect.
How are you?
Good, good. Hey, no public comments?
It just got.
Let's go. Sometimes we like it.
Right?
Most of
So this is the monthly financial report. We'll talk more about the budget in the next presentation. So for the month of July, we have general revenues of about 5 million, expenditures of about 4 million. So a net increase of about 1 million for ending fund balance of 6.9 million. Capital projects revenue of about 10,000, expenditures of 1.5 thousand, and then ending fund balance of 3.12 million. Debt service fund revenues of 17,826, expenditures of 0 for an ending fund balance of 2.9 million. ASB revenue $1,442, expenditures 30,720, ending fund balance 305.55. Transportation revenue of 1,237, expenditures of 0 for an ending fund balance of 282,300. Moving on to historical budget to actual revenue. Again, for this year, Next month will be the last month where we're gonna use 18-19 and 19-20 because it's the last time that we had two levies within the same cycle. You'll notice that the dollar amount is higher this month than historically in 18-19, 19-20. That was 4 years ago. But I do have good news when we get to the next slide. That you'll notice at the bottom, we did bring in more than expected for the month based on the historical percentage actuals. So the second to last column, monthly difference, we brought in 500,000 more than we expected this month, which is awesome. We'll get to expenditures, which almost offset it, but the good thing is we brought in more revenues this month. So his historical budget to actual expenditures, again, we did use last year and the year before expenditures. You'll notice, again, we are just flat. I don't know what happened in the first month, but you'll notice that everything else is almost flat. And I did talk about how it's hard to trend on something that doesn't match what we've historically done. So next year, we've already implemented items that if things get out of whack, I'll be able to identify within the month so that I can present it to you, as well as depending on what trend follows. I think we've already had some discussions of what years and how should we use it to try and be some type of historical trend. But going to the next slide. As we've been consistently flat, these 2 months are usually lower. We did spend about 280,000 more than anticipated this month based on historical trends and what those percentages would be. So our monthly allotment, we did spend a little bit more for a year to date total difference of 471,505. So we are starting to balance the additional expenditures with the additional revenue. We cut back on expenditures after having that huge increase. Now we're slowly kind of dying down. And then the revenues that weren't coming in because we had lower enrollment, we're now starting to collect on some of the grants and other things, which are starting to balance things out. And so we are hoping that even though we had to do the budget extension, we still will sit around that $1.7 million deficit by year end. If not, fingers crossed, even potentially a little bit better off, maybe it's only a $1.5 million deficit. And so fund balance amount, as you notice, the dollars and the amounts and the percentages are somewhat relatively the same. However, once you get to the fund for revenues and expenditures, when we get to the fund balance amount, even though we have the exact same amount as we did in 21-22, you can see the big line discrepancy of the percentage. And that's because of how much we spend it's because of how much we spend in total for the year versus how much we spent 2 years ago in total for expenditures. Between 42 million, I think, to now we're at 48 million, right? And so as you increase expenditures, even though you have the same amount of money, it takes more to make those monthly bills. And so that's why we're trying to get that percentage up there. And enrollment, it's not a lot, but we do have a little bit. And I had to provide this before we had to make some changes. We got a last minute bill from Skagit Valley College that we were not anticipating because most of our students do Running Start at Everett Community College. So there was actually 8 students for a total of 4 FTE in Running Start. Very last minute, I apologize. And then Open Doors are still 1 student for a total of 20. Any questions about the monthly financials or enrollment? Sure.
All right, well, good evening. And it's great. It's so fun to have everybody here. So this is just really fun. And now it really does feel like school starting.
I know it
Everybody's back.
does.
All right. I think today, I mean, this isn't the focus of my report, but I just have to say, if you were in and around our district today, there was a lot of activity and it was a lot of fun. So it was Cougar Days at the high school, at the middle school. It's fun to see students on campus, parents on campus, to see our freshmen working with Cougar Crew. It was great. And then just our family resource fair. So huge kudos. I want to really call out Christina, Lynn, I know Brian, who was hugely involved, Mark Howard, who's leading our Lakewood Coalition, and just our community partners. So just a lot of fun to see students and families in our community come together and really celebrate and get ready for the start of school. So great activity in our SSAs, and all of teaching and learning was greatly involved. So really the focus of my report, I spent a lot of time talking about, what have we been up to as we really turned that calendar and got into August. And so on August 6th, 7th, and If you were kind of inside the high school, you would have come up and seen our whole district leadership team along with 2 of our administrative interns. Spending time learning together and really planning for the coming year. So again, I want to really just thank again our cabinet team for just the immense work that went into planning and preparing a meaningful and robust opportunity to launch. And I think it was really well received by our building and departmental leaders. So we get articulated our work that we've been doing and kind of taking that to the next level. We spent time unpacking not only the kind of the work in front of us with strategic direction, spent time talking about how we really grounded ourselves in the CCDEI standards that have been approved by the state of Washington, reflected last year and where are we at as a district, and then talk about how do we move that work forward. Spent time talking about how are we going to use the data that we now have through the MIDAS program, which again, Baldy from Ryan has spent countless hours on. How can that guide not only our development of school improvement plans, but really be approachable and usable by our teachers in classrooms, by our principals, by our counselors to really guide and help plan those needs and supports for our students in the classroom. So there was time every single day for departments and teams to kind of talk about how do we take the information we're learning and bring it back? I think there is also, it's important to look at the safety aspect. We spend time reviewing our board policies. We know that there are some that are super critical, but through the lens of how do we create a supportive learning environment. Tim and Lynn and Lisanne do a lot of work surrounding that. And then Lynn was joined by Joanna Rockwood to talk about really our suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention plan, which we're bringing online, which kind of coincides with that JED forefront work that in terms of that grant the high school has. So it was a good time of learning. We also had fun. We had the Olympics theme, right? We talked about the flame of knowledge, of leadership, and of how do we pass that wisdom along and really work together. As we have the land of 7 lakes, we had 7 teams, each one after the name for a lake in our district. And you're looking at a member of the winning team right over there. It was like Goodwin, correct? And I will say that, you know, in the spirit of just like that making that leadership journey continue on. Every once in a while, Renee will, you know, wear and kind of share with others that medal, that way that we can just keep that memory alive, so.
No participation trophy.
My team got to participate, we were all winners, right? We're all winners, so, there might be some people in this room who are not as thrilled with the color of their medal, but we will move on. And the next slide, it really kind of highlights some of the other great things going on. So again, thank you, Sandy for attending. I know Lisanne and Lynn and Jeanette also were there, but just, the partnership we have with Link, which was on full display tonight. Yes. It's just phenomenal. And we're really lucky, I think, in our community, especially when we don't have that city governmental structure to really have community partners where we work together to be the heart of that community and to be able to reach out and support our students and families. And so Link fundraiser on August 10th, sounds like it was I was sad that I was out of town. It sounds like it was just it was just a great night, a fun night. And I believe that they raised somewhere around $20,000. And so, and a really successful fundraiser. I want to highlight Saya and Riley joined us last week as we came together. We started planning Cougar Cabinet. So we jumped in and started doing some just planning of those details and kind of getting things kind of lined out for the year. But we're excited and I think it's going to come really quickly.
Yeah.
It was also a great opportunity. The stickers that Renee designed, I didn't realize that they are like prized possessions, and so
They are,
Yeah.
like, stickers are everything for me, and if she gave me stickers, I was really happy the whole day. Yes,
Yeah.
like those ones.
And that one actually says Cougar Cabinet, that version.
I like it. Where do we go?
I don't know how I ended up with that.
Oh, my goodness.
I got there and then I was like, okay, no, this one doesn't say
So
Cougar.
tonight there was another version that did not say Cougar Cabinet, so there's a
Yeah,
variety of
tonight.
stickers, and so now we know that we're gonna have, we will need to. I was able to spend some time at ECE, so we were lucky enough to have the district applied for and received a grant with Snohomish County to partner with Continua, who's a consulting firm, really in supporting our students. And so we have our key program that really is focused on meeting, unique needs of some of our students in our district. And so staff at ECE were able to work with the consultants from Continua to really talk about what are those systems and structures that we can work together to make sure that we're setting our students up, for that great launch in the school year, and then kind of talking about what are some of those kind of, how do we, how's that vision we're going to be actualized as we move forward kind of throughout the year. So I think in addition, we're really lucky. We have a lot of the staff in Achieve coming back this year too, which allows for that growing of that program and to be able to kind of just further that knowledge along, and great relationships with the students and the families who are in the program. So that just makes that launch of the year so much better. Last Wednesday, so you just have a picture that's probably hard to make out the detail, but it just showed what the public offering was of our bonds that went for sale last week. So we'll talk more about that at our next board meeting, but that was another successful day and a great opportunity to continue to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. As it so happens, the closure of that sale is the first day of school, which is also our next board meeting. So I'm sure you see the focus of a part of our report for them. So, and then last but not least, again, kudos to Christina, launch of our new website, a huge piece. I know that Baldeep was busy working. There was a lot of behind the scenes working on getting that going. So tons of communication with our buildings departments about what to put up, what's going to need to stay up, and like really won't change throughout the summer. So what it was became a static document, really. Our website, Christina could make some edits, but individual users couldn't change it. So if there was something at like the high school they wanted to change, they need to work through the district to do that. But any of those changes would be wiped away as it came back, I believe, and kind of relaunched. And so I know that, Christina is a realist. And so we were talking in cabinet about like, well, we hope it just goes off with no issues. She's like, that's not how it's gonna happen, but we hope that those issues are minimized to be, very manageable. And Baldeep was in agreement with Christina, like, that's not happening, but we just wanted to have a smooth transition. And thus far, it's definitely looking like that. As you go on right away, what you'll notice is things are very, the translation feature is new, but we're really calling attention to where these things are at. We're excited this is going to be a great vehicle for our students, our families, and our greater community to stay abreast of what's going on in the district. So transitioning to the last page, there's so much going on. I just really didn't have a lot of room. I just had to kind of look out like a week in terms of when school starts. So definitely we have, tomorrow we have our new hire orientation. Today was a day full of things. Also high school football started today. The rest of our sports start next Monday. I know that the band is coming back together and that there is band camp starting on Monday as well. And then we have our all staff welcome back kicking off next Tuesday. And then that will, for our certificate, that be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. September, we have our first day of school, we have a study session, we have a meeting, we actually have a core planning team for strategic direction work. And then I just listed a lot, gives that full idea of really our sports are in full effect. As soon as we get going, really games are happening, and we have our first home football game the Friday of that week. So lots going on. Because of our adjusted start to not starting until Wednesday, the fourth day count won't happen until that following Monday, which I think is really gonna be a great piece in terms of enrollment, even though it's not gonna coincide with that Monday being like Labor Day or anything. I think historically it's not unusual in the districts I've been into, just sometimes have folks not make it back for those first 3 days, but make it back to that preceding piece. So it allows us to have the best opportunity to capture, I think, the most accurate and largest fourth day count we can by kind of going and bridging over into that next week. So fourth day count will be on the 9th as well as first day of kindergarten. And then we will be starting open houses already by that following week. So huge observances. Obviously, we have Labor Day, Patriot Day on September 11th, and then Constitution and Citizenship Day on the 17th, which is one of our state recognized holidays that we talk about in schools. And that there are a number of kind of awareness months of coinciding also in September. So that's kind of
Busy times. It's exciting though. I was at the high school today and then also went over to the to Link Northwest activity going on over there. It's just so much fun. Just watching students walking to school today, walking to the school, to the high school, and and walking into the high school this morning. It was They're all coming back. I did have a chance to look at if you guys haven't seen the website yet, take a peek. It's great. Good work. Yeah, it is great. Yep. Okay, unfinished business 2024-25 budget reading and resolution 08-24, second reading. Welcome back.
My comment earlier about comments, if there was any, I would have loved to answer them. Just sometimes I get put on the spot. All right, well, I don't really plan to go through it again since we went through the reading last time. High level, the general fund will be in about a $1.2 million deficit. And then there was a question related to the 4-year forecast related to enrollment. And I did a little digging, and the reason why towards the end it kind of sheltered off is because we have large graduating classes, 211, 180, and 210, I believe. And as we have those classes going off, even though we're adding the enrollment throughout the areas, because we're starting with the kindergarten class of 160, we're just keeping it flat at 160. When you get rid of 210 kids and you start with 160, you have to add quite a few to even increase.
Yeah,
And so that's kind of where we started the tabletop, because this year you saw the 111 seniors is kind of the projection. FTE, there's more than 111 seniors, just showing up to class a little bit, right? Maybe you're not in first period, maybe not in sixth period, maybe you're at running start, maybe you're doing other type of activities. And so that FTE going from 111 to 160, that will show that large increase, but then when you go from 210 to 160, it's a lot different. And then 160, 160, 160 after you lose a 210 and 180, it starts.
got it. Super. Looking into that, that's good.
Were there any other questions about?
I have a general question, because this year we had a planned deficit. Next year we do, it looks like the year after that, smaller. Like, what are we doing different? Like, to have confidence that we're gonna be able to balance the budget eventually and get to where we're just kind of at a good steady state where we're
Yeah, I think
where
there's
we
a
wanna be.
No, I understand what you're asking. I think there's a lot of factors that play into this. I think a lot of this team, as well as Aaron, is involved in kind of what that means and strategically doing what we're doing. I think without 85% of our budget is people.
Mhm.
And we also understand that we're a school district and we don't want to impact the classroom. And so we look at what areas we have, where we have, and what programs we have, how much funding we receive. We look at everything in totality and try and look at areas where, is this something that we're going to continue doing, or is this something that isn't? I think Erin brought a good document to cabinet one time called, I'm not sure if she started with you as well, called the budget dance, and discussed different types of goals and the strategic goals associated with it, and then looking back at things they've implemented and seeing if they are effective or not effective. In addition, we're looking at multiple different areas from an expenditure and a revenue standpoint and trying to project what that means for us. There's other things going on that I can't get into too much detail on, but we are trying to be proactive when bargaining, because we understand that those are continuous costs and that we need to be able to afford those continuous costs. And as we continue to do that, I think conversations been had, and that you'll notice the deficit spending kind of goes down by a certain amount each year.
Mhm.
And if we can continue to reduce spending each year by that amount without having to do anything drastic,
Mhm.
then in the long run, once we get to balancing out, it's our job to remain that sustainability and keep it at that level. I know I'm not going like into too much.
No, I understand. I guess it's just knowing, that we've got a plan to, we're burning our fund balance down a bit, but then we have a plan to,
Yes,
not burn it down anymore, you know what I mean, to get better.
no, I understand what's going on in our area.
Right. I think that's just making sure that we.
It's multifaceted though. I mean,
Right.
I think the hard thing is it's kind of like, watching 50 different things, right?
Yeah.
And so this is going up, but this is going down. And I
Right.
think a big piece, and it kind of started with what James was speaking to in terms of like 85% of our budget really, or expenditures are related to staffing and staffing related costs. And I would say like, we work closely with Tim and our building principals, and Brian was a huge part of it, and Lynn. We really spent a lot of time doing staffing for enrollment. So we first looked at, what are the sizes of our buildings, what are the, what the sizes of our classes, and how do we, not, push them to the outer limits. So how do we really make sure that we're, looking at what's that kind of sweet size for those classes and making sure that, do we have enough here to, do we need 4 or 3 sections? Like, do we need, really spending time and having those conversations. And so I think a lot of that, kick off with doing the enrollment projections and getting into the staffing plans and going, how are we going to make sure we're offering the programs and, that our students want and that they need to prepare them for, that next level, whatever that's going, from a middle school to high school or high school to college and out to the work world. And then kind of making some of those decisions. So we did actually reduce some costs just in terms of, we'll use attrition for that, right? So
Right,
as we were like, okay, well, we actually need, we had 2 less classroom sections like at elementary, and it was attrition that actually led to the reduction of those. And so trying to kind of find those pieces and have open conversations with our labor partners as we're doing it, and just being like, we're trying to make sure that we're making those strategic decisions all the way along. So in addition to looking at revenue expenditures and grants, it's also trying to, look at what are we, what are the programs and services that we even want to do to build our programs. And there's some areas that we're even, adding, right? So obviously, the resource officer and this is that, and we built into our budget, talked about the levy, looking at what are those, kind of maybe potential tier 2 supports in terms of the students are having, kind of big emotions at different levels. And so I think trying to be thoughtful about as we add, how do we have that thinking in class, and then where can we pull back to?
One other thing I do want to say, just from a high level standpoint, is what we are doing is doing it based off of assumptions, right? So we talked about an increase in student enrollment. We talked about those type of things. And I think something that you should feel comfortable about is that we are on top of anything that could have a financial impact. We've already met 3 times this week, and we have meetings for the next couple of weeks discussing enrollment to start the year, choice transfer, what our classes look like, making sure that we don't have overload. We're trying to take everything into consideration as the school year starts, and then as part of what we do each month with enrollment, we're doing the projections, we try and make sure that we're on target, and if we're not, we try and make adjustments that we can on the fly. In addition, we're even already talking about, do we use flow analytics again? Do we potentially use a different person to review? Do we need to do one this next year? Is our data good enough? Some of those conversations to really make sure that what we are doing, you guys feel comfortable with, and it's not just us, there's third party or other people out there saying the same thing. As much as we want you to trust as much as possible, we also want to be able to provide other feedback and like, hey, it's not just us, like, here's what other people feel as well.
Right. I think that kind of was going to get to my question about the enrollment and the staffing to enrollment, because we are projecting enrollment growth this year. My question was going to be, do you know where we are at for current registration for those numbers to see if, and are we, again, continuing to wait to see that enrollment actually is here before we adjust staffing levels if needed?
Yes, no, and again, that is a huge partnership with Tim and Aaron having those conversations. Is it okay that I shout out Tammy? Please. Tammy, who has been doing a lot with the choice transfers and having the conversations with those families and where we're at. And either if they're on pause or if we decline them and we potentially might accept them, or any of those conversations. I know she's on top of it. The first day that we said, yeah, it's open, I think you said she spent the whole day on the phone.
Whole thing. Yes, sir.
So.
Yeah.
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 Again, it's been a great partnership, just making sure that we're doing everything we can possible. So, and we are in a much better place this year than we were last year when it came to the start of the year enrollment from what we're seeing.
So, yeah, I mean, so, Tim's been working, Tim works with Tammy, they're talking multiple times today. But, Tammy's, together, they created this spreadsheet, so every single day it's updated, and it has everything from what was our budgeted enrollments, what's the current Skyward count by school, by grade, how many teachers do we have at that grade level, how many open choice transfers do we have? I mean, like, he's got all these different data points, and so we're monitoring, and then even today, like, Tim's like, okay, we're up at this grade, we're down with this grade, we're monitoring school by school, grade by grade, watching. A big part that we saw is that, we had kind of pushed pause on some of our choice transfers. And, the budgeted number is 162. The other day we had like 138 in our Skyward numbers. However, we had another 15 to 17 sitting out there in choice transfers. So we met by school, placed them in, and Tammy's been making those calls. People are excited, right? So then we're going through. So even as we're monitoring those numbers, as we're starting to see those, they don't actually trigger into Skyward until they turn their packet in, then they're kind of turned on at that school. So, I think this morning we were at, 23.8 FTE under budget, but then we still had a good like 8 or 10 of those kindergartners and packets haven't come in. So we're like, okay, so we're off 17 in kinder, but we're not really. And so we're monitoring and looking at each one of those grades, any place that there's an opening, looking at where that goes, looking at who's in the choice transfer, reaching out. It's also, as we do that, real time kind of almost being done behind you, so because then you'll have records requests coming from other school districts. Now they're down at this grade. And so that's why we have to, it's not like we can meet and say, oh, good, we're done. Okay, so we're gonna continually monitor into that start of school. Next week will be huge, especially as we have like in our elementaries as they come back on that Thursday and they're, we just tend to see more registrations, but we're in that season where it's almost one in, one out. And so really for us, closing those gaps becomes a conversation of who's out there in choice transfer, who still might want to come in. So that's where we're spending a lot of time every day, just, really having those conversations.
I mean, I appreciate that question, Dana, because this is information really that we should be talking about, should be out there. I mean, there's just so much information, so much being done.
Right.
And it's all very real and tangible information specific to this district. So, that leads us to whether or not we are going to use flow analytics again, because we have our own information, especially specific to our district. It's going to be so helpful as we move forward. And yes, we did read and discuss the budget dance that Dr. Murphy brought to our retreat, and it was good information. Yeah, I agree. It really helps, us to understand how this all works to a certain degree.
I want to do one more kind of shout out, and that is, Brandy Simi works so tirelessly working with Skyward and working with our registrars, but Brian has been since last spring in direct conversation with our buildings and monitoring on a regular level, kind of almost weekly or bi-weekly, to now it was getting much even more truncated, those kindergarten numbers. So our biggest hurdle last year was kindergarten,
Yeah.
right? And they're the cohort that we don't know, right? We're like, who's out there? And so it's our shot in the dark in terms of, remember, we just used last year's number as this year's starting place, hoping it would be a little bit bigger, but now we're just working to kind of hit that target. So I think it was a wise target for us. But, Brian's been in direct conversation, which has also been with Tammy, like, okay, here's the numbers, where are we at? And so we're trying to triangulate that data because it's such a squishy thing to try to put your finger on, but we're feeling good with our sections and where they're at. And right now we have 9 sections, and definitely our goal is to just to fill those 9, and it feels like they're accurately placed in our 3 schools.
I have a question about that. So, I guess 2 questions. Like, then how are kindergarten registrations compared to last year? Are they the same? Are they lower, higher? But then the other question is, now that cohort is going to 1st grade, is it getting bigger or is it staying small? Or do we know yet? Like,
Are you looking at me?
yeah, anybody?
We're gonna have to see what the 4th day count is. I mean, I think right now our projected numbers for 1st grade, we're down a little bit. So our numbers are a little bit down from where we projected. And again, we were using I think we picked a 2-year growth model. So we're a little bit off, but that will remain to be seen.
Right.
In terms of who actually shows up. We also added uniqueness that, again, last year we did the data, 17% of our students were choice transfer, right? So I think when almost 1/5 of your kids are choice transfer, your own historical data gets a little convoluted by that
Right.
other kind of outlying variable. So, right now we're looking at, wow, did we say no to any 1st graders who now we can let in? Because our first ask was, Tammy has been calling the kindergarten families in. And so we're kind of moving our way through. So, So I think it's kind of just convoluted in that piece as well.
Okay.
To answer your question, though, there currently are more first graders enrolled at this point now than there were at the beginning of, or even I think at the end of last year, kindergarten.
Right, so we picked up some numbers.
So we picked up
In that.
some, but the amount isn't the same amount that historically we've seen.
Right,
between
okay.
kindergarten.
And we talked about it this morning, even our kinder numbers now look better than. Or than they did last year, but then our target was different last year
It
too,
was,
right? So-
right.
And we're starting earlier, we've been monitoring since last spring, so we're doing,
Mhm.
I think, by next year, we'll have like, we're even saying like, gosh, next year, we actually have now historical data.
Right.
You know,
I
you know,
think we
we're-
even have better information this year.
Yeah.
I mean, just based on what we went through
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
There's adjustments that were made. and- Yeah. that's it. Questions? This is an action item.
I make a motion to approve, the 24-25 budget reading and resolution 08-24 second reading.
I second.
Discussion, any more discussion on it?
Now I ask.
Aye.
All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, nay? You.
Right, yeah, thank you, and thank you for answering all my questions.
This.
New business, minimum basic education report, 24-25. Director Tupon.
Good evening. I have submitted the minimum basic education compliance report. Each year, the State Board of Education receives from each school district this report. And then reviews it and certifies the school district based on our answers to those reports. I've never answered no, so I don't know what that would look like, but the good news is we are doing everything that we are expected to do and more. You know, without going into all the questions, just some of the highlights are the number of instruction hours. We use an average in our district of 1,027 instructional hours. All of our high school requirements are met, including opportunities for those not planning on college. So kind of those things that are real obvious, yes, we offer 24 credits. That's clear, every school district must, but do we have those opportunities for those students that are at college? Or how do we find those other pathways for those students? So we're compliant in all those areas, social emotional, learning, requirements, comprehensive sexual health, all of our observances, that we do, how we use our emergency waivers for our graduation. There are two areas of encourage that we are not meeting at this time. I just point those out in case you saw those preemptively. We do not have a class in ethnic studies in grades 7 through 12. It's encouraged, not required. And as far as I know, we do not have awareness of bone marrow donation in our health. Again, encourage that one. I think we can make happen this year, but I didn't want to say that we did. Fairly new, that one's fairly new, ethics studies, we haven't had that conversation about whether we want to opt for stuff like that. So any questions about any of the responses there? or-
Not for me, anybody else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Policy review, revised policy 3115, home student second reading. Yeah.
Good evening. This is the second reading of 3116, which pertains to enrollment rights and services for students experiencing homelessness with the goal of minimizing and eliminating educational barriers. There are no edits or changes recommended during the first reading. Do you have any questions for me?
Action item.
I make a motion to approve policy 3115 homeless students.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll have the next one.
Yes, you do. 3116, students in foster care policy second.
So this is second reading of policy 3116, which pertains to enrollment rights and services for students living in foster care with the goal of minimizing and or eliminating educational barriers. Again, there were no edits or changes during the first reading. Questions for me?
Make a motion to approve policy 3116, students in foster care.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. You. Revised board policy 3143, district notification of juvenile offenders, second reading, Dr. Murphy.
Okay, so this is the start of the series, so here we go. So policy 3143 is an essential policy. I think it's important to note that, the draft I brought you actually has an updated title, so this would henceforth be known as policy 3143. Notification and dissemination of information about student offenses and notification of threats of violence and harm. We had the first reading of the updated policy on August 7th, and there were no edits or changes suggested. So I do recommend approval of updated and renamed board policy 3143. Notification and dissemination of information about student offenses and notification of threats of violence or harm.
Action item.
And make a motion to approve policy 3143, notification and dissemination of information about student offenses and notification of threats of violence or harm.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Retirement board policy 3144, release of information concerning student sexual and kidnapping offenders.
So this is actually, I think, kind of a fun piece, because this is actually where you start also cleaning up, right? So the great piece about 3143 is it actually brought under that umbrella two of our other policies we're talking about tonight. So with that update, 3143, this policy is no longer pertinent and has been retired by WASDA. And so I'm bringing before you tonight that recommendation as well. So I recommend deletion or retirement of policy 3144, release of information concerning student sexual and kidnapping offenders as a first and final reading.
I make a motion to retire board policy 3144, release of information concerning student sexual and kidnapping offenders.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Retirement of board policy 4315, release of information concerning student sexual and kidnapping offenders.
Your eyes do not deceive you.
Yeah, I
These two
know.
policies have the same title, which is very interesting. And Renee and I even double checked, we're like, okay, well. So also, with the update of 3143, the policy 4315 is now umbrella underneath there as well. So I recommend deletion or retirement of policy 4315, release of information concerning student and sexual and kidnapping offenders as a first and final action.
All right, I make a motion to retire board policy 4315, release of information concerning student sexual and kidnapping offenders.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Revised board policy 3421, child abuse neglect, second reading.
So I brought for you tonight is policy 3421, child abuse and neglect. This is an essential policy, and we had our first reading of the updated draft on August 7th. During that reading, there were no edits or changes suggested, so I recommend approval of updated policy 3421, child abuse and neglect.
I make a motion to approve board policy 3421, child abuse and neglect.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Revised board policy 4200, parent access and safe and orderly learning environment, second reading.
So before you can tonight, we have updated draft of essential work policy 4200. This updated draft does have an updated title, so we added parent access and in alignment with the laws or guidance. So the new title is parent access and safe and orderly learning environment. There's a lot of ands in the title, but I think it's very clear what it's about. During the first reading, there were no edits or changes that were suggested, so I recommend approval of updated and newly named board policy 4200, parent access and safe and orderly learning environment.
Make a motion to approve board policy 4200 for parent access and safe and orderly learning environment.
A second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. Revised board policy 4210, regulation of dangerous weapons on school premises, second reading.
We did want to say, Julie, we don't always do the same policy, just so.
Oh, you're good.
I just wanna- you know, like,
It's not really true.
well. Do a lot, so that's fair. Keep me honest. We're trying to get to your bunch.
Yeah.
So this one is a essential policy as well. And it's kind of, I think, one of the more, unique names of one of our policies. During our first reading on August 7th, there were no updated edits or changes. I did want to call out that Dawn had a great question. She was curious if, I think it was in the procedure, if it says slingshot, and she's like, gosh, is that a typo? And I was like, no, I double checked, because I was like looking through the kind of the WAC, the reference. And then I did get curious as to what exactly that was. I was like, wow, that's not a typo. What is it? I learned it's actually a nautical term, and it's used for actually kind of the docking of boats. And so it looks like this big kind of like ball of rope that has like a weight inside of it and has like rope tied to it. And when used as a weapon, or used as not a docking mechanism, would be considered a very dangerous weapon.
Very
So
interesting.
therefore it lies
Of all
within
things.
the laws. And I know, so I was like,
Washington.
I know. It's like, nope, not a typo. And now I learned even more about a nautical kind of device. So there you go. So having all that being said, we're good with, I think, kind of how it's referenced here. So I recommend approval of updated board policy 4210, regulation of dangerous weapons on school premises.
I make a motion to approve policy 4210, regulation of dangerous weapons on school premises.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Revised board policy 4215, tobacco, nicotine products and delivery device, second reading.
All right. So board policy 4215 is also an essential policy. During the first reading on August 7th, there were no edits or suggestions for change. And as a note, there is one, this is a slight readjustment of the current title. And that took out the word and in the first one and did add a comma, but by and large, it's the same title. I recommend approval of updated board policy 4215, tobacco, nicotine products and delivery devices.
Okay. Make a motion to approve revised board policy 4215 tobacco, nicotine products and delivery devices.
A second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Revised board policy 5202, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration mandated drug and alcohol testing program, second reading.
All right. And so again, this is an updated copy of a current policy. This is an encouraged policy. And during our first reading on August 7th, there were no edits or changes suggested. So I recommend approval of updated board policy 5202, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration mandated drug and alcohol testing program.
I make a motion to approve policy 5202, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration mandated drug and alcohol testing program.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And then new board policy 6701, recess and physical activity, first reading, directed on.
Good evening again. This is a new policy, not just to Lakewood, but passed and required for this year. 671001 is recess and physical activity. all elementary schools that have, students, through K-6 are, or I'm sorry, any that have through K-6. But that is not true of sixth graders in the middle school have to have 30 minutes per day of unstructured physical activity as recess. There's a second part to this, that's the most exciting part. The second part, I don't want to get lost, is that there are expectations for planning for physical activity for all of our students, K-12, in addition to that. And some recommendations of ways that those can be achieved throughout the day. Some of those would be for being on a sports team, some would be through PE, some would be through some other activities of movement. So we need to ensure that that's happening as well. But this policy does expect that we will investigate, and make sure that's happening as well as the 30 minutes for recess each day. Well, I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about the policy before that.
We've had some discussion about extra time for Kathy, who's coming in. So often to talk about more recess time, more activity time for students. And kind of looking deeper and more discussions about that. I mean, it sounds like different schools, different classrooms and teachers do provide that
Right,
to a certain extent. And,
Yeah.
So, I think to somehow be able to share that information somehow would be really kind of.
Yeah,
A good way of really kind of honoring some of that
Sure.
time and effort. from our community about that.
yeah, I can share right now and then talk with Kathy as well. Yeah, CCE has, for the most part, Monday through Thursday was not an issue for us. In providing that, most buildings were already providing 30 minutes, sometimes 25. Now they're getting up to 30. The Friday was a difficult one. But for example, CCE now has 3 recesses. They added in a third recess, which is not required by the law that you have 3, you just have to have 30 minutes, but also very much recommended by most people is that try to have as many opportunities instead of long blocks. LES added in another recess on Fridays as well. The difference is that they're at different times of day. Some are 2 before lunch, 1 after lunch. It just depends on staffing and the way the schedules are set up. And then ECE could go with 2 recesses and after lunch and 1 before lunch to meet the minutes. I could summarize those and share.
That would be great
Yeah.
for her to hear
Yeah.
that. It's good.
And I did mention that, 6th grade, if it is in elementary, is required to have 30 minutes of recess every day, but because ours is middle school, it is not. But, there's a second part to, this is physical activity, and at the middle school, they are required to have 100 minutes per week average throughout the year. We run semesters, and have 235 minutes per week, so when it gets averaged out. Would it be great to be able to give PE to every kid 3 times a week? Yes, but facilities and staffing and resources we don't, so it's where the semesters.
Discussion on that?
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
about the procedure? I
Yeah.
know you'd mentioned like the recess being after lunch. In the procedure, it's recommended that recess be before lunch if it's tied to a lunch. How many of our schools are
Mhm.
doing that? I think it was more implied that kids giving kids adequate time for food, or did I read that wrong?
Yeah, so that they're not making choices between eating and.
And recess,
going to
yes.
recess. No, they all have definite times. You eat this time and you. I'll say at the middle school, we used to do that, but we didn't have the recess requirements. But,
Right.
So some kids would choose not to eat, but at the middle school, that can be appropriate for some kids. All of them have a recess before lunch. Most of them have, but 1 attached to their lunch and then 1 after. But not in lieu of that.
Right. Okay. Any more information, any more questions? All right, thank you.
I just
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to share that, we have added I did add a passage to the procedure. It's in red that goes above the laws of language because we do not have the ability to use active transport as part of our physical activity and wellness. Like, in the case we will, and we'll be able to incorporate that into our plan. for physical activities. Thank you.
Okay, we will move into board discussion of possible legislative priority. Time where board is going to discuss some specific legislative priorities to our district and how it is important to us. And not sure how we want to, who wants to start. We've had some sort of thoughts on some of the things that are specific and important to us. Fully funding education, special education, MSOCs, regionalization. Those are some three very important pieces to our district and very important to this board in discussing some of these things in the past. And so all of those, it's hard for me anyway, to kind of prioritize those three, say which one is more important than the other. Regionalization is so important to this district right now. Fully funding education is so important to this district right now, just as it is every district. But for our district, it just seems like all of these three things impact each other. And so because of our small district and because of how we are surrounded by larger districts that don't have the impact that we get through regionalization. So and then the MSOCs, materials and supplies to operate the district. How important that is to be funded by getting state funding. I was looking up some of that information in 2023. It's funded per student, is my understanding, and it's funded for each student $1,483 and some odd cents in 2023. It's expected to be funded per student $1,514 per pupil, which that rate doesn't really come close to covering the actual costs of running a school district. And so, when there are costs that exceed state funding, we have to cover the gap. And that's where all of these things come together in terms of funding. So I don't know if you guys want to share anything, some of your thoughts on these three areas of importance to our district specifically.
Yeah, I think, and looking at these three, I think these are a good three to really prioritize. I don't know, again, I think loss of regionalization likely has the biggest financial impact to our district right now, because again, we are losing regionalization faster than neighboring districts around us, and we do not receive the same regionalization funds that same regionalization rate as our neighboring districts. And like the MSOCs, again, I know we've talked about like the rising costs of insurance and other things that are out of our control that are not being fully funded. And special education, there's a little bit of gap made up last year, but there's still quite a ways to go in order to help fully fund that. So I do think that these three priorities seem like good asks for the legislative session from the state level to help so that our local levy dollars are not making up some of these gaps that we're currently spending.
I mean, I think, what is it, 20% that we spend on levy, our levy dollars on special education.
Yeah, you're backfilling the unfunded pieces. And I think, during the board retreat, when we were talking about obviously there will be a laws of platform and supporting that, but really, as Lakewood and as a board, like what are when we have legislators to come or when we go and interact, like what are the things that we're gonna say, like, we agree with this, but for us, these are the pieces. I think that the three, for the reasons that, we talked about, these are huge. I mean, when you start to look at, 20% of the levy every year, just feels, which we feel is absolutely, not only is it like that moral imperative, but it's so important that you feel, wow, that's 20% of something that's supposed to be fully funded. There really are local taxpayers are trying to provide opportunities for students that are above and beyond basic education. And this is basic education, right? When you look at MSOC, it is everything. So that's like, it stands for materials, supplies, operating costs. So it's the electricity. It's making sure that we have books. It's making sure that we have insurance as a school district. It makes sure that we have gas in our buses. So it's a mix kind of all those things. And we spend more than we get. And so it's like, well, that's interesting that it costs that much. Why don't you just get that much, right? And so, cause it's not like we're not buying like, the premium gas, like, we don't, we're not kind of like going like, what am I this for? And so, and I think so many of those things are out of our control. Like when you start to talk like the bill we get for our utilities, similar to your home, is the bill we get for our utilities. We don't have the ability to say, I'd like to pay less. They'd say, well, I hear you, and this is your bill. And so, so I think some of these are just, they're just the cost of doing business. And that's where I feel like the MSOC really shows up. Things that are above and beyond us wanting to have, a certain curriculum or something that costs more. To me, that is where the dollars come in, right? That is that enhancement, that community is made a priority that we want to offer us. I think that's appropriate, right? And I do, and just kind of to echo, the loss regionalization is fascinating to me, like how, how we were selected to go down, but our neighbors not, when we share the same zip code, right? So if it's a cost of living in an area, and we live in these same areas, I don't understand how that necessarily happened to us and not to them. And not that I want that for them, but I just want to be made whole to match our neighbors. So I think when you start to look at the gap that is created and where our taxpayers are stepping in and what those funds could be reutilized for to meet other learning goals and needs, I think that's where, it becomes a really great opportunity for advocacy. And as we talked about, creating pages that are unique to our district, so that when folks come in, we can say, when we say MSOC, this is what we're talking about in Lakewood. When we say loss regionalization, this is what we're referencing, and to be able to give documents that they can then use when they're in sessions or in conversations with other lawmakers. So.
And by doing that, I don't know what kind of question this is, but when we talk about surrounding districts that aren't in our situation when it comes to that, it was a 12%.
We're going down to 12% this year, yeah.
So for instance, let's say Arlington, who, I don't know what theirs is, but
I have them all memorized.
Okay.
I looked at Marysville, Arlington, and Stanwood.
But-
Stanwood and Arlington are the same as us, regionalization for base, but then there's another factor called an experience factor, and they get a point for in addition. So even though they're technically 12 like us, because their experience factor, which the state won't tell us exactly how they determine it or when they're gonna determine it, put them at 16% instead of 12.
So do you think and this is really just I'm not sure if you can answer it, but is this as important to them as it is to us? I mean, in terms of legislative priorities?
I would think so. I think this would be potentially an opportunity for collaboration with our local boards. I think to build off what Jamie said, I think part of it is the transparency of decision making, right? So at state level, right? And absolutely sure there's just, I've been unable to understand it. And when it comes to the experience factor, and I think I've shared with you kind of my experience in my last district with that. We didn't have it, then magically we did get it, right? And we got it, other people lost it. And so it seemed like in this last go round, and I don't know if Stanwood and Arlington had it before, but as people were losing regionalization, certain districts all of a sudden got this experience factor that then kept them whole. So it wasn't that their staff had radically changed and now was a much more tenured staff than they had been in the previous year, is that somehow in the financial inner workings, they now had this experience factor. So, and we walked down from 15.
We went from, 15
We
to
went
13 and a
13 and a half to 12, right? And so, when I look at that, it's like, I think it's just trying to understand, like, if this is happening to other folks and instead of losing this, they got this, and it's like, then why not us, right? And so, and I think that there's an opportunity to just say, like, we all have very similar staff. We've not had massive people or massive growth and tenure. And so how do we confront it?
And, a lot of that or part of that or a piece of that is relationship. You know, really taking it to the legislature, bringing, representatives to our community and gaining those relationships to really let them see where we're at with things.
And I think out of that, they ask questions too.
Right, yeah. More thoughts on the three? We spent some time on,
No, I mean, kind of to Aaron's point, when you talk about prioritizing them, they all have like the same outcome. It's not like, oh, if we don't get that, then this really good program we'd like to have, we'll have to cut it, or we'd like to do. I mean, this is just the cost of doing business. So really, it comes down to, like, if we're gonna prioritize them, it's which ones are gonna bring us the most,
right, for sure.
you know, get us closer to whole.
Well,
But, yeah, I mean, there are things we're gonna spend the money no matter what, we have to. So,
right,
whatever.
good conversation. We will be attending the, one day, and it is Zoom, right? The General Assembly. Thank you.
Yes, I think it's 2 days. I think it goes over, I think it's a Friday and maybe a part of a Saturday.
I'll be on. That's it. One day.
But I think that we'll be going to that piece and then definitely we're working right now to, walk in Representative Paul and his visit. And then I think we'll be inviting back, Senator Representative Shavers and Senator Mazzol, and then trying to make some additional connections.
Yeah.
With some of our other legislators before they get into sessions. I think anything we can do, honestly, September, October, early November. I think we'll be well served to then give them information and then to make our day on the Hill even that.
Yes. Steve continues to be our legislative rep, and we appreciate your work that you do and sort of the impact that you've had and really kind of moving some of this forward recently. I appreciate that. Okay, so our next regular board meeting is September 4th, 2024. Special board meeting study session September 4th, and we are adjourned. Everyone.
So you didn't do a score for this time and you probably won't have a